Guys, what is this weather? I'm not happy about it. I refuse to put the heating on, but it is freezing in this house. As I'm recording this, we haven't even hit autumn yet. And suddenly it's like coat, jacket, boots, thick clothing weather. I don't like it. I miss summer. Also, like, are you even British if you don't start your podcast episode by talking about the weather? Hey everyone, it's Mads. Welcome back to another episode of Lowkey Adulting. This episode I feel like is going to be quite different to normal just because it's quite personal. It's going to be quite deep, I can imagine, just based on like the notes that I've written out for the things that I want to talk about for this video. But at the end of the day, it's a very real and raw topic, and I think that a lot of people are going to be able to relate to it. So it's something that I definitely knew that I wanted to do. I was just trying to think of the best way to handle it with as much care as possible because it is quite a sensitive topic. We're basically going to be talking about all things mental health and anxiety, my experience with it, but mainly I want to talk about antidepressants and medication. I feel like there's such a stigma around talking about antidepressants and medication and everything like that, but we are finally at a point in time where I feel like we can actually break that stigma down and talk about it. Mental health is something that is talked about more and more nowadays, which I absolutely love. Like, I'm so glad that we're finally getting to a point in society where it's acceptable to talk about your mental health. But some people still aren't sure of how to talk about medication and taking antidepressants, going to the doctors, trying to get prescribed them. And as someone that last year was struggling with anxiety so bad that I went to the doctors and practically pleaded for them to give me antidepressants, I wanted to tell my story and my experience of anxiety and what that kind of looked like for me, if that makes sense. I feel like a lot of people are quite quick to throw the anxiety card out into the open nowadays, which for the most part, I totally understand. Everyone has anxiety in them. It is normal to be nervous and anxious for an exam or a driving test, but living with anxiety on a day-to-day basis is a completely different ballgame, and I just kind of wanted to break it down and talk about my experience. It's overthinking and spiraling and seeing it crop up in situations where A, you really don't need it to crop up in, and B, situations where you really wouldn't be expecting it. It kind of just comes out of nowhere, and that is living with anxiety day to day. Cutting a very long story short, from October 2022 through to April 2024, I was dealing with an ongoing health issue. Within that time frame, I had 4 surgeries. I basically couldn't do anything with my life within that period of time. I had chronic pain every single day. I barely left the house. I didn't go to work. I didn't go into the office for probably about 2 years. I was basically stuck indoors physically from the fact that I couldn't physically do anything because I was in so much pain, but also stuck indoors mentally. I got to the point where I didn't know how to live my life without having chronic pain. I basically didn't remember what life was like before my surgeries and before I was physically and mentally well. That's like the easiest way to put it. It consumed so much of my life, and actually it consumed a lot of my first couple of years into adulthood. So I started to feel behind in my adult life because suddenly everyone was completing uni. I obviously dropped out after 6 weeks, as you would know if you have listened to episodes before this. But honestly, like, thank God I did, because there is no way that I would have been able to do uni whilst I was having all of my surgeries like happening. So like, I guess everything happens for a reason, but like, I wouldn't wish the pain that I was in on anyone. But I basically felt like my life had come to a little bit of a standstill, and I was still stuck at like 19 when actually coming out of everything, I was turning 21, I guess. So I felt like I basically had like 2 years of my life taken away from me, and I didn't know how to physically and mentally process that. When I was physically well enough to start living my life again, all I wanted to do was get back to my life. So I threw myself back into it before actually considering and thinking about the repercussions that that could potentially have on my mental health. I'd spent 2 years not really leaving the house, not really seeing anyone, and suddenly I was back to work, back to life, going into London. I went to the Eras tour last year, which obviously that was like the best experience of my life, but also like the worst. Also, I went to that concert alone. I did a solo trip to Wembley when I was only just really starting to get better, not realizing how much of a toll on my mental health all of these little normal things that like a normal 21-year-old would be doing would actually have on my health. But I was so beyond desperate to just live my life again. I feel like I've always been quite an anxious person anyway. I remember back when I was 10, I had an issue with eating. I'm not going to call it an eating disorder because I never got diagnosed with it. I did go to the doctors about it, but they never flat out said, you have an eating disorder. But I know that I had like an issue with food, an issue with eating. That happened for the first time when I was 10, and that's happened probably a handful of times from the time when I was 10 to like maybe 20, 21. There have always been some situations where I felt anxious. For some reason, a lot of my eating issues, I feel weird to like call it that. I honestly don't really know the best way to word it, but a lot of that would happen just before I was going on holiday with my parents, whilst I was on holiday, and then like the couple of weeks, maybe month after I got back from holiday, which I just find so bizarre because I love going on holiday. I love spending time with my parents. The whole situation just never really made sense to me, but I'm also that person that overthinks everything. And if something has happened to me once, it's going to happen every single time after that. But yeah, over the years, there have just been moments in time and certain situations that have made me feel anxious, school being one of them. For anyone that doesn't know me personally, I was quite badly bullied in secondary school. Everyone always made me feel like the odd one out in secondary school, especially because I was posting on social media so young and my videos were really cringy. One of my teachers put my YouTube videos up in front of a classroom of people and someone filmed it, posted it on Snapchat, and everyone was laughing at it. It was just like a whole thing, and because of that I found school really difficult, and I feel like that also didn't help my anxiety. I had some time off school. I was signed off by the doctor because my anxiety was just so high, and I was like hyperventilating before school every single morning, and my mum was like, this is not something that can continue. So I feel like basically over the years there have been moments where my anxiety has been increased, but I never really knew the answer because when I was younger, conversations that I want to be having about mental health didn't really happen, which honestly is really sad because if I could have spoken to a doctor or a therapist, or if anyone understood how I was feeling at that point in time, I'm sure that my school experience would have been so different. So it's sad that so much of my school life was consumed by those anxious thoughts, but like it is what it is at the end of the day, you can't change it now. But coming back to last year, I remember I'd done the Eras tour in June, I went to my sister's wedding in Italy in June, everything was amazing, but also I had this underlying anxiety the entire time. And I'll never forget, one of my colleagues, Holly, had just started and it was her first week, and my boss basically said to me, I'd like you to go into the office with her and train her a little bit on the systems that we use and what she'd be doing on a day-to-day basis. And I was like, cool, fine, all good. I have no idea why, but that entire day when I was in London in the office, I suddenly just had this overwhelming anxiety attack that I could not figure out like why. I really didn't know what was happening, and it was the most frustrating thing. Anyone that has anxiety or has been diagnosed with anxiety will know that it's one of the most frustrating and indescribable mental health issues because a lot of it happens for no apparent reason. Why did I feel anxious in the office that day? I don't know. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Nothing different had happened. Nothing crazy made me feel some sort of way. I just had this overwhelming feeling that I could not control. And my parents have always been people that I can openly talk to about things. I'm really, really close to my mum. I literally tell her everything. And I walked out of the office that day, and from the moment that I left the office to getting on the tube, making my way to Victoria Station, I was just crying the entire time. But I just remember texting my mum and I was like, I really need to speak to you about something that's been on my mind recently. It's about anxiety, blah, 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 blah. And obviously straight away my mum came back and was like, okay, we'll have a conversation. That's absolutely fine. Just don't stress yourself out. We'll talk about it. We'll sort it. We'll get through it. She came to pick me up from the station once I got home, and we basically just had this massive, long conversation about how I really wasn't okay. I jumped back into life and I didn't know how to cope with it. I didn't know what my life was. I felt so disassociated from reality. Nothing felt real. Everything felt so spacey in my head. Like, it's really, really hard to describe it. And if you have anxiety or you've experienced anxiety, I feel like you'll know what I mean. But if you haven't, like, it really is like hard to get your head around, because a lot of the time it just doesn't make sense. Like, mum was saying, so what's made you feel like this? And I'm like, I don't know. That is the frustrating thing. It's like, I have no idea what brought this on today, why today of all days I'm feeling like this. But honestly, I just got to the point where I couldn't cope with my anxiety and everything was getting too much. I didn't go to work for a couple of weeks. I just got stuck in this mindset where like I didn't know how to escape my own brain, which is the scariest feeling, because I was like, well, I'm never going to get better. Like, I'm always going to feel like this now because so much of my life has been taken up by my illness and my chronic pain that, like, what even is life without that? And honestly, it was a really, really scary time. But my mum said to me, look, let's call the doctors. They might be able to prescribe you something. They might have like different therapy things that you can try. And I was like, fine. And honestly, I was really hesitant to contact the doctor to start potentially taking antidepressants because I don't like the thought of taking something and putting it into my body if I don't need it. But I got to the point where I was like, I need something to help this change. Like, this is not okay. I can't live like this. So I spoke to the doctor. They put me on a very low dosage of escitalopram, which is a type of antidepressant that is specifically for treating anxiety and helping with like serotonin levels and everything. They put me on a low dosage of that. I didn't feel any change. They put me on dosage that was a little bit higher. I didn't feel any change. And then a little bit higher, and I felt so much better, and my anxiety had gone from like here and like feeling really, really awful all the time to suddenly like a little bit level. Everything felt somewhat okay, and I hadn't experienced that feeling in years. Honestly, it was like the best thing that I think I have ever done. I'll be completely honest, I have no idea where I would be, what my life would be looking like if I didn't call the doctors last year. Something else that I did was start to see a psychiatrist that monitored my medication and made sure that it was working, assessed how I was feeling, etc., etc. And then for a while, I started to see a therapist who was basically helping me get back into life, but the right way instead of like jumping back into it. And truly, as I said, best decisions that I ever made. I know that it's really easy for me to say this, and I feel really lucky that I have a supportive family and a supportive network of people around me. But if you feel yourself start to spiral in a way that you physically can't control, all I can suggest for you to do is speak to someone. And I feel like even if it's friend, mum, dad, guardian, sister, brother, whatever, I always feel so much better. I almost feel like a weight's been lifted off of my shoulders the second that I have got something off of my chest. Even to this day, if there's a day when I'm not feeling 100% and I feel really spacey and my anxiety is like starting to increase, the second that I say to someone, look, I'm not feeling my best today, I'm feeling very anxious, something is a bit wavy and a bit off balance today, it automatically puts me at ease a little bit because I don't feel like I have to hide that. And if I feel myself start to get more anxious, if I remove myself from the situation, then no one's going to question it because they know what's going on. I feel like for me as well, like a lot of it was an embarrassment thing. Two of the big situations that make me feel anxious now are the theatre and also the cinema. Two situations that are very, very hard to escape from if you feel anxious. And as I say, in terms of an embarrassment thing, I have to always really check where I'm sitting in the cinema and in the theatre before I go. Like, I specifically make sure that I book aisle seats so that it's easy for me to get up if I can and leave if I need to. And also like semi-sit towards the back if I can, because I don't want to like stand up, everyone looks at me and thinks like, oh, what's she doing? Like that's the embarrassment thing for me. I don't want people to see that I'm not okay if I don't know them. I think that's like a lot of what it is for me. I think for a long time I just found it really, really difficult to talk about, even though I'm so close to my family. I just felt silly, I felt stupid. I felt stupid at the fact that I couldn't explain why I was feeling the way that I was like throughout the last few years. And at the end of the day, there are people that think that anxiety is stupid, anxiety doesn't exist, anxiety is something that you just need to get a grip of. There are people that would call people with mental health issues snowflakes, which I don't agree with at all. And people are more than welcome to have their own opinions. If you're listening to this and think I'm being stupid, then fine. This is not the podcast for you. Switch it off, unsubscribe, leave. This is a safe space. I want people to know that it's okay to be open about these sort of things. It's important that we have these open conversations. I think it's really important for people to know that I have battled anxiety. I am on antidepressants. I am better. My anxiety, I feel like, is just always going to be there. It is what it is. I'm a naturally anxious person. I don't want to come off of my medication. I feel so safe with it. I might get to a point where I feel like I need to come off of it, but honestly, it's just been like the best thing that I've ever done. It's not for everyone. I'll also say that. I know people that have tried certain pills and they haven't worked, and then they've tried others and they have worked. Everyone is so different. It is not a one size fits all. I just got lucky that the first pill that I took actually made me feel better. Also, I think that there is such a stigma around talking about antidepressants and mental health and anxiety, depression, everything like that. But I can guarantee if you sat down with your friends and family, there will be some people in that group that are on medication for a form of mental health issue. I know so many people that are on medication now that I've like openly talked about me being on them. It's not something to be ashamed of. It doesn't mean that you took the easy way out. It doesn't mean that you're weak. I physically could not cope with the way that my brain was, and my medication has balanced out my brain. I'm not embarrassed to say that I take medication or anything like that. In fact, I'm proud of myself for the fact that I actually took the leap, called the doctors, saw a therapist, saw a psychiatrist. And I know that not everything that I just mentioned is available to everyone. I feel very grateful that I was able to do that. But I think the first initial step that helped was contacting the GP. If I didn't do that, then I wouldn't have done anything else. And I explained my symptoms, I guess you would say, or like how I was feeling and everything like that. And they talked me through my options. They said that medication was one of them. I was open to taking it, so I did. In terms of things that help me cope on difficult days, it's just trying to stay as calm as possible. If I'm having a bad day, I try to stay at home. I make myself cozy. I'll spend time with friends, family, my boyfriend. We'll just have a chill day, because that is what I need. I know that I need that when I'm feeling anxious. Some people need to stay busy and need to keep their mind away from it. I just need to feel as relaxed as I possibly can. And you know, sometimes it is hard because I'll have those days and it will make me think that I'm taking steps backwards and I'm like going in the wrong direction, but it's not the case. As I said, anxiety is always going to be there for me. Sometimes I do have days where I feel worse than others, and the way that I always seem to describe it to my mum whenever she asks me how I'm feeling, I say that I'm feeling spacey. Like my head feels a bit like a dream, like nothing feels real, nothing feels like a reality. It's weird. And honestly, something that I just wish that people understood more about anxiety is that it's really fucking hard. I was only diagnosed with anxiety in probably September, October last year, so like roughly a year ago. I still have days where I find it really, really hard to navigate like how to explain how I'm feeling to people. It literally depends on the day. It depends who you're with, what situation you're in. And as I said, sometimes anxiety will just come on at the most random and inconvenient times. Like, make it make sense. I don't understand. It's so frustrating, and I just wish that more people understood that. Sometimes everything just feels very loud and all you want is peace and fucking quiet, and your brain simply does not give that to you. It's the most annoying thing. But honestly and truthfully, I'm getting better. In fact, I'm 1,000 times better than I was like this time last year. The difference in my brain is just wild. And honestly, I do put most of that down to the fact that I started taking medication. I know that it's a difficult conversation to have. I know that sometimes it can be an awkward and tricky conversation to have, especially with family and everything like that. But I genuinely feel like it is one that needs to be had. It's so important. It's absolutely essential that you are doing everything you can to make sure that your mental health is where it should be. If you are feeling low, like you're spiraling, you're feeling spacey, you don't know how to cope on a day-to-day basis, that is not normal. Something is not right. You should not be made to feel that that is how you should feel. You deserve more than that. That is not how you want to be living your life. And honestly, if that is how you feel, you need to speak to someone, you need to speak to a GP, from someone that has been there and has gone through all of that. I cannot stress to you how important that is and how much better it has made me feel. Like from last year to now, it's just wild. But as you should know by now, this podcast is an open space. It's a safe space. We have real, raw, tricky conversations. Nothing is off limits. We talk about anything and everything. Anything goes. And I just felt like this was an episode that I really needed to film, and I really wanted to like knuckle down on how important mental health is and protecting your mental health, taking care of your brain. It's so important. That's basically the message that I want people to take away from this episode, is you have to take care of yourself. And talking about it if you're not feeling okay is like step number one. It's probably one of the hardest steps in your journey, but it's probably the most essential. I'm really glad that I've recorded this episode. I really hope that it has helped someone and has made people feel more seen. That's my goal. You absolutely are not alone. There are so many people around you that will probably be feeling exactly the same way, and you just don't know it because not enough people talk about it. But take this as your sign to talk about it, to talk about how you're feeling. Even if you're not necessarily feeling anxious, you're just having a little bit of a down day, speak to someone about it. As I said, I always feel like there's a weight being lifted off of my shoulders and I'm getting stuff off of my chest when I speak to people about how I'm feeling. But I'm also always down for a chat about anything. So if you found this video helpful, or you just want to have a little bit of a chat about anything that I spoke about in today's video, then make sure to drop me a DM on Instagram at Lowkey Adulting Pod. If you enjoyed this episode or found it somewhat helpful or useful, then make sure to hit subscribe, leave a review. It really does help. If you're listening to this and you're not watching over on YouTube, I definitely recommend you go and do so. I'll leave a link down below. And I really do appreciate you tuning into this episode. It was an important one and I hope that you found it helpful. Thanks so much for tuning in. I will see you very soon with a brand new episode. Bye for now.